So then we are back with more understandings from the Aramaic English translation of the scriptures, mostly from the Renewed Covenant. And then we begin to understand the functions of Ruach HaKodesh, ministering, and where they should be found at. So then we understand that there are no ministries outside of the camp. Related with the Creator, there are no ministries outside the camp. So then we can prepare ourselves for the revelation, vengeance to come. Some people, they ask you, what are some of the signs of the vengeance then it's coming? Well, we begin to understand what it means of having city camps, churches. City camps, churches. You begin to understand the concept. When he ascended into heaven, Yahweh himself ascended, then later they would go out and they would form holy lands around the world. What we have, for instance, in Revelation, of the first chapter, are the 7 churches. Those are the 7 churches, cities, camps. Okay? Have it in mind. Revelation was translated by a pagan country. They did omit the area of the camp and the service area. Those were city, camp, churches. They were cities, they were camps, they were churches. There is the singular that gives us the idea. There were many of them set up. Those were then cities, camps, churches. So when you read it then in Revelation, the 7 cities, camps, churches, those are the main anchoring cities, camps, churches where vengeance is coming. Gives you the idea of it. And then gives us the understanding that the vengeance is truly coming. Those are the main places from where the vengeance is coming from. Then we begin to understand what it means. Through those churches, the sounds of the trumpets. And those trumpets, they were twisted. They should be shofars. A lot of people, they know them as trumpets. There are no trumpets, there are shofars. If a person doing the sharing has a trumpet, throw it away. There is no trumpet. Only shofars. Okay, so we understand that there are no trumpets. Trumpets are from pagan kingdoms. From the Hebraic, always shofars. So then through those churches, then vengeance is coming. And then the first angel, and then the second angel. How many angels were in those churches? Each angel per church, wasn't it? Each is standing in their respective churches. Isn't it true? Each sounding from a church. So those were anchoring places from where vengeance is coming. But then the pagans, they don't understand. They think in those angels they are in heaven sounding, because they're going to be in heaven someday. So is that true they're going to be in heaven someday? No, it was made it up. They were made for the earth. What are they doing in heaven for? Does the Creator say He doesn't want anybody there when He's doing His vengeance? Vengeance is His. He will repay. He didn't invite anybody to be part of His plan. He has His own counsel. He Himself takes care of it. We are going to be resting. and very grateful, because what is the fun being up in heaven? Let's say, for instance, if we were, since we are not invited and we won't be invited, but let's say if we were invited, posing, okay? What are we be doing in heaven, watching people then being burned, being demonized, being slaughtered? What kind of a movie would you be watching then from heaven? Is that a situation that you enjoy watching, people being slaughtered? What do you think a wrath or vengeance is? If you enjoy these situations, then you are demoniac. We should always repudiate war and destruction. That's why we are not invited up there. We are going to remain resting, and let's be grateful for it, because then we don't have to watch this junk of the end. Junk of the end with a reference of people being slaughtered and destroyed, people with a lot of pain, while the vengeance is taking place, because the vengeance is holy. We understand. But then why are we being involved in it? We don't have any part in it. We are going to be resting. So then we begin to understand where vengeance is coming from those 7 anchoring city, churches, camps. Okay? So it shows you that those places, they must be yet re-established. Are those 7 churches re-established? No, they are not. They went in disrepair. They must be re-established, because vengeance is coming. So lots of events taking place in the future, isn't it? Because Yahweh is coming to the earth, and Yahweh is going to say to Yahweh, what have you said to them down there? I said, this. Didn't say I, but myself said this. Is that done yet? No. So then get busy. We are not dealing with a broken contract. Each word is spoken by the Holy Creator must be done. Each word that comes out must return completed. So what then Yahweh is going to say to Yahweh? What have you said? Said this. Let's make sure it gets done before we get the vengeance going, shall we? Kind of a placing emphasis, because then we understand, as people understanding from the Hebraic viewpoint, the importance of having those areas done. And that's why you have then the understanding of the renewed covenant, 7 churches, cities, camps, each angel sounding per church. So those must be repaired. And then that's why there is the reduction of the time, so then the Hebrews can return to their camps and begin the restoring time. So they are going to practice the second service, first anointing, and then including those 7 churches. Because Yahweh is going to ask Yahweh later, in quote, what have you said? Is it done? As you would ask your worker, what you received? You received this. Is it done? The analogy remains the same, either in heaven or in the earth. Is it done, the task that you say we're going to do it? So then we begin to understand. It is very serious, isn't it? Oh yes, it's very serious, because it's coming an event never experienced before. Vengeance was never experienced before in our history. And some of the indications are making themselves very evident. For instance, the heat of the planet is increasing, drought is increasing. Obviously, famine is going to increase. So then, the false churches must be exposed. Those are liars and scoundrels. Granted, a lot of them unaware of. So he must take some understanding, some mercy, and then explaining to them what it means, so they can come out of Babylon. Babylon is confusion, the confusing religions, and then come to the real Messiah. So then they can exercise the faith. They exercise their faiths. And they come together on Shabbat and they celebrate together. So then those 7 churches are 7 city camps churches. So we begin to understand what it means. What is then the Holy Land? Camp, a city, and a church. They have a perimeter where they service, where the Gentiles they service the camp. The camp is a tiny city with many tents around, a tiny city. And then they are the church. Yahweh is in the Holy of Holies. And they are exercising the second service of the first anointing. So then later they receive a second anointing. So then they teach, obviously, with the stick of iron. So then we are more acquainted with it. But there are people honestly unaware of. And those are others that are plain scoundrels. Can you imagine 20, 30, 40, 50 years teaching junk, and then they are confronted with the truth? Boy, they're going to resist a bit when they hear, do they not? But then we Gentiles, we help them. We make sure they are then shared properly. Share the instructions from Shaul, and those are not a word news, simply refreshments of what was taught. There is no new teaching anymore. Do we realize when the last Shaliach died, that was the end of it? Teaching and preaching was done. There is no more than the scriptures that can be recorded. There are the functions of Ruach HaKodesh pertaining to the existing present situations and personal situations, and words of knowledge and wisdom from the previously taught scriptures. The teaching that they refer of those then set apart, those are based upon what was taught. They reteach what was taught. That's where teaching comes from. But it's not a new teaching. It was a reminder of what was taught before, but then comes out in a form of teaching. But those were done. So then the originality of the scriptures, then they remain original and safe. What we must understand is there are some filtering that must be done because of the scoundrels Greco-Romans. And then we encourage then the Hebrew brothers to return to their camps and release their hands from the trades of the world. There is a price to be paid in each camp, so to speak. And then in terms of the Gentiles, we pay the price not having any ministry. We don't involve ourselves with any teaching of the scriptures. We are then being shepherded. But we have the trade of the world in our hands as Gentiles. The set apart, they get 100% of the ministry, and they are loyal 100%, and they have the most important, the presence of Elohim in each camp. It is already enough. Why are they wanting to be involved in the trades of the world? The world is junk. They are being serviced by the Gentiles. Let the Gentiles deal with these trades, junk of the world. Not junk to the point of being unworthy. Try to understand the point. Comparing with the presence of Elohim in each camp, being complete in His holy presence, it's much more important than being in the world doing trade. So let then the Gentiles do their tasks and serve the camps, because the camps are the authority. Starting to make sense, doesn't it? And they don't go out of their camps in the world shoving Torah teaching in their throats. No, they are guided by Ruach HaKodesh. The people, they come to their gates for more understanding, more teaching, and inquiries, most importantly. Do you understand the concept? Shaul and the other Shilishim, they went out to visit with the Gentiles to teach them the relink, because there were no city church camps during the time. They were being formed yet. To understand, there was a transition of time. The time came, then Yahweh came in person, then He did what He had to do, then He ascended. From there, then the people, they went and started forming holy lands around the world. During this time, the Gentiles could not be neglected, so they began to teach and to preach the relink. So then, if we then turn to Yehuda, Yehuda is very interesting because it shows us part of it. Okay? Jude, first chapter. He starts then, Yehuda, servant of Yahshua the Mashiach and the brother of Yaakov, to the set apart. He's first given the first understanding to the set apart, the Hebrew brothers in their camps. Okay? Then later, the beloved of Elohim, and then preserved by the Mashiach. Then the second verse states, mercy and peace and anointing. This area then he's shifting to the Gentiles, because mercy and then faith is Gentiles, isn't it? Outside the camp. Why is he saying this way? Remain, stand by. My beloved Goys or Goyim, while myself taking many pains to write to you of our way of life, it is required for me to write to you, encouraging you to maintain the conflict for the faith once delivered to you by the set-apart believers. And then later, he says, for some have obtained entrance into the camp. So why is there this mixing going on? Because they were on their way to form another holy land. That's why you have this area. First is set apart, and then he mixes a bit with the mercy, and then he speaks of then be multiplied to you, and then he states of then the faith. Because they were on their way to form another holy land. And that's why later then he brings the understanding of Egypt, when they would go out in groups. Because they left their position and they were then forming another holy land. That's why you have Egypt then later. So it shows you the validity and show you where they came from. But when Yahweh ascended himself, They were yet forming those holy lands around the world. And then the Gentiles, they couldn't wait. They had to have some nourishment in terms of teaching and preaching. So then they received the relink. And then it was a very kind of a troublesome time, because the situation was this. Then Shaul would go out at times, and then the Shlishim, they would teach the Gentiles, and then would come around the people of the circumcision, or sometimes the unsaved brothers, forcing them to maintain the laws of Moses. And then they would go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, until Shaul came, and then later he began to delineate what was to be Gentiles and what not. By that time there were already many camps around. So it started to make sense, doesn't it? And the understanding, when then Yahweh ascended, was for then the Gentiles to serve the camps. The set apart people, they would not be working the land anymore. They would be devoted 100% to the instructions and the prophets and the writings. And they would be ministering to them outside the camp, but then the service of the land would be entrusted to the Gentiles, because they were learning how to be servants. They were being made tzaddik, or his justices. And it takes time. They would service the land, then they would hear them. They would then return to their duties. They would service the land, then they would hear them more, participating in the Shabbat. And their faiths then would increase every time, until the day that some of them would be then invited into the camp for further training, with the objective of forming another set of people, another group. And then they would go out and form another holy land, as they themselves started as a holy land, so they would find another area to set up a holy land. This is where the church is at. When then the Savior was speaking with Kepha or Shimon, Peter was never his name. His name was Shimon. His nickname was in Aramaic Kepha, because he had a very strong head. In terms of the way he was a very strong person, personality-wise. So then when the Savior asked, "What do you think of myself? You are the Son of the living Elohim." He came so natural, so strong, and he said, "Because your name is Kepha, and the analogy of your name as a nickname, then upon this truth that came from you, that's the foundation of my church. With the same strength that came to you, with this strength, then his people would teach from the church, in the camps, as taught by Moses." So it started making more sense, doesn't it? So then when they would go around the world, they would set up holy lands, and they would shepherd the Gentiles. And there are always price to be paid. Set apart people, they don't mix themselves with the trades of the world. They are set apart in their camps. They have Elohim with them. The services of the land and the provision of the land then is given to them, and they maintain the camp alive. So then the camps, they are dedicated to teaching the other people. And they don't get involved with the junks of the world's trade. It doesn't even compare. And then the Gentiles, they can't have ministries of any kind. No pastors, no teachers, not evangelists, not miracle workers, no prophets. But they have the world trade to be concerned with. So they can put into practice their faith. Started making more sense, doesn't it? So then when we begin to read then the Gospels, the 4 first Gospels, those are merely the relink. Plain and simple as you can ever be. The link broken in Adam was then re-established. You have 4 views from 4 people of the same topic. Relink, 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 and relink. Later you have then the Acts of Ruach HaKodesh. And then you have the writings. Those were the guidelines then. Understand, after the relink, there were no then city churches around. They were being formed. Because there are a couple of areas set apart, Hebrews and Gentiles. The Gentiles were given the writings except Hebrews. Hebrews, the Hebrew writing is specific of the second service update. Starting to make more sense, doesn't it? So then the best is then for us, Gentiles, encourage our Hebrew brothers to return to their camps, because it's much more interesting for them to be served while they are in their camps than to be involved in the world's trade, because Yahweh always wanted His people to be set apart for Himself, not to be mixed with the world. They are not to be mixed with the world, because they have a loyalty to the covenant. They have a damn covenant. They don't mix themselves with the trades of the world. Otherwise, they then become a curse because of the broken damn covenant with Abraham. It must be maintained holy. That's why people, very often, they get pushed to the Torah in their throats. Because the Hebrews, when they are in a trades involvement, they push and they use as a weapon against the Gentiles, where they themselves should not be there, or should say the set apart people shouldn't be involved in any trade whatsoever. They should be in camps. The Gentiles, they have the trade of the world. The set apart people, they are in their camps being obedient 100% to the Torah, the prophets, the writings. In exchange, they have the 7 spirits of Elohim and 7 functions, and they are served. On the other situation, they are the Gentiles. The Gentiles, they don't have any ministry, but then they have the trades of the world. So each to his own. Gentiles, they have their faith and their set of guidelines, and they have their duties, the trades of the world. The set apart people, they don't have any trade in the world. They are served, and they must be in their camps. The example of it, when Yahweh came with the chance of being then a king, to being king over the nation, he fled away. He did not want it, because it was for him not to be involved with the kingdoms of the world. And kingdoms have to do also with what? Trade. Then you have to deal with the scoundrels, with liars, with cheaters. And the set apart people, they were not made for this. They were made to stand in their camps, being loyal to Elohim because they are in His presence. Starting making more sense, doesn't it? So then we understand what's coming in the future, because then we understand that the weather then is changing. It's becoming warmer. Every year more and more and more heat. We are very close to entering then the revelation. We are not very far away from it. The political arena, in quote, let's then be absolutely secular. Okay? So then, in a political sense, we are going to be behind China in 40 years. Our economy can't hold anymore. And then, after 40 years, when then our market is going to be very weak, it's going to start political fights for supremacy. And then it's going to come to play a lot of areas: foreign policies, pricing, trades, market, influence upon other countries. Okay, because we are speaking of the secular world at the moment. And then a fight for supremacy of the oceans, of the air, technology, and then resources, minerals, what country can get it and what country can't get it. And then also we understand, because of this political fight, information is going to be put under the control. So prepare yourselves, including myself, because the internet is going to be regulated. We are not going to have as many liberties as we have in the near future. The internet is going to be put under the control. There won't have any more documents exposed and then scan the documents and put it in the computer. Won't have those anymore. They're going to start to have a lot of secrecy, because the political unrest is going to be very evident in shortly of 4 years. Take the time and study IMF, the International Money Funding, or the organization responsible for the monetary system. Begin to study their remarks. It's very interesting. They already predicted that our monetary system must be changed. We are going to be behind China in 40 years. That's a very short time. And when the political unrests become then very evident for supremacy, then a lot of regulations are going to become very evident. Much more related with technology. You won't have as the liberty as we have today in the near future. It's going to be very regulated. Because then each technology is going to count. So then we can prepare ourselves then from the time that this political unrest starts regarding our country, related with other countries such as China, because we owe them a lot and their military is far stronger than ours in materials and also manpower. Then we are going to start understanding that a nuclear blast won't be for very long until. So we have a very short time to make decisions. And the most important is then coming to the Messiah, the true Messiah, and truly be saved and obedient. begin to watch. Okay, going back to the secular. Watch the weather, and then the famine, and then droughts, and then the political situation until the next 40 years. And analyze it, only analyze it. Then later begin to read the scriptures. A lot of developments. And a prophetic time clock ticks every time. So then stay tuned, much more coming up.